Let's start today with mass shootings. Whenever there is news of a specific mass shooting, understandably, the focus becomes the facts of that particular situation. When we had the Buffalo mass shooting, where this 18-year-old was targeting black people, this was in Buffalo, New York, not this past weekend, but the previous one, we immediately, understandably, correctly spoke about the details of that incident. Where did the individual come from? What were the motivations of the individual? Who were the victims? What was the response? What has been the political response? And on and on. And whenever we do that, we often will lose the perspective that there are so many of these mass shootings in the United States that it would almost be a full daily podcast just to keep up with the mass shootings that are taking place in the United States. Now, I spoke to a couple of people yesterday, just casually texted friends and said, hey, I'm researching for a story I'm doing. If I just asked, how many mass shootings have there been in 2022 so far, without looking anything up, what's your sense? And many of them wrote back something like, well, I'm aware of like 3 or 4 specific ones that like made the news to the threshold that I was aware of it. So there's probably been like 40 or 50 because we have a huge mass shooting problem here in the United States. We have had, as of yesterday, 210 mass shootings in the United States so far. It's only May. It's only May, and we have had 210 mass shootings. Never mind individual shootings, as well as shootings in which 2, but not more than 2 people were injured or killed. Remember, if one person shoots 2 people, by most metrics, that's not considered a mass shooting. You could argue that it should be. But depending on the archive or statistics you look at, it only is considered a mass shooting when 3 or 4 people are injured or killed. And bearing that in mind, if you go to the gun violence archive, and you can download a spreadsheet of this, you will see 210. Actually, in fact, I believe the number is now 211. Since I last looked at this, there was a mass shooting yesterday in South Carolina, North Charleston, where 5 people were injured. So it is now 211 mass shootings in the United States. Every single one of these is a story that impacts many people, families, friends, coworkers, etc. If we pick a random one of these, just for example, the second most recent one, which when I looked yesterday was the most recent one. When you look at that one, that was in Goshen, Indiana. By the way, a place I've been to. And it took place on Rosemere Court. When you look at the victims, there was a 17-year-old male who was killed. There was a female injured, another female injured, another female injured, and the suspect is believed to be a 20-year-old male who was also killed, according to the information that we have here. And for every single one of these, typically there is a media source that you can look at. In this case, the media source takes us looks like it's a Facebook page, a release from the Goshen Police Department talking about how an emergency call was received that a shooting took place at a residence. 5 individuals were injured, according to the report. EMTs were sent out. 2 injured females were airlifted to a trauma hospital in Fort Wayne. 1 was taken to a hospital in South Bend. An injured male was taken to Goshen Hospital, but has been declared deceased, and 1 male was pronounced deceased at the scene. Every single one of these is a story that affects so many people's lives, and most of these don't even make national news. And one of the things I've talked about before, NPR also about 9 days ago did a story on this. At that point, 9 days ago, there had been 198 mass shootings. Now we're already up to 211. Whenever there's a news story that doesn't have a clear beginning, middle, and end, it often will not make it into the news, or whenever there's an event that like that. So when we talk about, well, there was a shooting where 1 person was killed and it gets more attention than thousands of people in the United States, or however many, are going hungry. Whereas that's a major story. How do we still have hunger in a country as rich as the United States? Well, it comes to what makes a good story for corporate media. And I've spoken about this before. Terrorist attacks, weather events, individual shootings, votes on a particular bill, those have a defined, typically, beginning, middle, and end. They have very clear players. There are very clear sort of goalposts for what is the coverage expected to be and how are these topics discussed. Regular corporate media is not really set up to talk about hunger in the United States in an ongoing way. Okay, there's a food stamp bill, Democrats for, Republicans against, whatever. But the news, corporate for-profit news, is not really set up to talk about that. Malaria in Africa, dysentery, and these are not the types of stories that corporate media is designed to address. And even when you look at the politics, the political stories, the intractable and corrosive nature of how we select our representatives and then how they don't really represent our interests, that's an ongoing and major story. Arguably, it's one of the fundamental stories about how American politics is broken. It doesn't really have a clear beginning, middle, and end. And as a result, it's why you often don't see much about it in corporate news. So to go back to the beginning, 210, 211 now mass shootings in the United States, and it is not even Memorial Day. Sponsoring today's show is the new book by Jason Murchie called Wisdom, a Very Valuable Virtue That Cannot Be Bought. This is an excellent book I've been reading through. No book can really teach you how to be wise, but this is a really well-researched nonfiction book that helps readers grow to love the pursuit of wisdom, which is really a process at the end of the day. And if you spend just 2 minutes watching my show, you'll know America has a significant lack of wisdom in many ways. Republicans have made an art form out of failing to think critically. They have their flexible and exclusive values, moral dogmatism. Right now is probably one of the low points in this particular sense in American history, with Trump, tribalism, the pandemic, and just the lack of wise thinking. The author of the book, Jason Murchie, believes that while liberals ought to aspire to be tolerant and compassionate, right-wing extremism and political chicanery must be resisted and overcome. And Murchie really brings a refreshing array of insightful and interesting quotations and personal reflections. It's a deep and wide investigation into what wisdom is. I've been really enjoying reading through it. It's really easy to read in chunks. Each chapter kind of stands on its own, so you can jump into the book very quickly. It's a book that could have a really powerful impact on a lot of readers. Pick up a copy at davidpakman.com/wisdom. The link is down below.